Was I supposed to say something? I probably should have said something. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Swagger Souls here. I have another video for you guys. I know my uploads have been terrible, but don't worry about it. Yeah, that's about it. Just don't worry about it. Today, what I have for you, gentlemen and gents, is we are going to be working on cool tricks.
Cool tricks! Cool tricks! Yeah!
That's right. I got some cool tricks, stuff you can basically do that pretty much anyone can do in editing, or not really in editing, but in music production, to give you that extra little razzmatazz that some people really want to get. I'm gonna go over probably maybe like 3 or 4 of them. I don't want to make this video too long, but let's get into example 1. So for example 1, what we're going to be talking about is the swell. Essentially, it's that whole entire hype thing that people do for intros of songs. You know how when the song kind of starts off and then it swells in, then there's a huge explosion of sound? That's what we're going to be going for. So I have, actually hold on, let's jump into Pro Tools where we can talk about how to do this effect. So here I have a song that I'm doing with a friend. It's called Small Town Girl. It doesn't make any sense, where it's whatever. But as you can see here, I'll play the effect so you know what I'm talking about, and then I'll show you how to get that effect. So let's begin. Alright, so that's the effect. That's the swelling effect I was telling you about. This effect is actually really easy to get, actually. You could probably do this anywhere between, depending on how good you are, probably between like 30 seconds to a minute. So let's go ahead and start. So the first thing we gotta talk about is our first layer. The first layer is this layer here, labeled appropriately as creepy. Okay. Next thing we're going to talk about is the different layers that make up this. The first layer that we need to talk about is this one, appropriately named creepy. If we solo it, as you can see, it's just a clean patch. So it's just a clean patch. It's really simple. There's nothing really going on here. The easiest, so there's 2 different ways of doing this. The first way that you can do this is actually with volume automation. So if you go over to your volume level here, if you actually look over on this level and you watch the creepy fader, which is right here, as it plays, you can watch the fader be slowly brought up, and that's through volume automation through Pro Tools. So as you can see, it's slowly being pushed up. So that's one way of doing the effect. Another way of doing the effect is also doing it through EQ automation. So we undid all the volume automation. So now if you listen to the song, there's no swell up. Easy, right? So this is where we can do our second volume automation, which is not really a volume automation, it's more of an EQ automation. So what we're going to do is go ahead and just grab any EQ. I'm just going to go ahead and use the stock Pro Tools EQ. You don't have to use this one. And what you want to do is you want to actually go ahead and take your low pass filter. I set it all the way up and just set it all the way as low as it can go, so 120. So now your volume, your clean patch is going to sound like this because you have the EQ on it. So it's kind of hard to hear it. If you have a really good speaker system, you can actually hear the low end of the plucks coming in. Now, what we're going to do is in Pro Tools, the easiest way to do this is right here, this button. This is your automation button. So when you click it, it's allowing you to control all these different parameters with automation. So we can control the bypass, input, output. What we want to go ahead and is control the low pass filter. So we're going to go ahead and try to find that. So here we go. We have the low pass frequency, the slope, the Q, the enable, and the type. What we want to control is the frequency, because that's going to tell us which frequencies we're getting rid of at all times. So go ahead and put that on there. And now, as you can see, a little green light came on underneath our low pass filter for the frequency. So now I can control the frequency. So as you can see, it moves it forward and back, and that controls which frequencies go through the filter now. Now, what you're asking is, how do I get Pro Tools to do it on its own without me having to do it specifically? Because you can, if you wanted to, you can do this by hand and just go. But no one wants to do that because you don't want to sit here and do that by hand. So we're going to go ahead and show you how to do volume automation, or EQ automation. Sorry, this also works for volume. So on Pro Tools, there's this little parameter here called waveform. You can now switch this, and you can now see how it says your EQ, and it has your low pass frequency right there. So now this is controlling it, and this is set to the 120. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and make another anchor point real quick. Put it right there. And then what we're going to do is we're just literally going to drag this up. And then we can drag it all the way up so that way the low pass filter is completely gone. Or you can drag it up to where you were going to low pass anyways, which normally is probably around like 12 to 14K. And now you have this effect going on as opposed to the first one, which is the volume swell. Which is pretty cool, but you can also add another layer to this. Now, so what you can do is you can also add the volume automation that we had before. So if you wanted to go ahead and do that, you would just go ahead and make another anchor point right at the end, drag the beginning down, hold up, drag the beginning down, and now you have the volume swell as well as the EQ swell, so that way you can have that epic intro that you've been wanting for. And I know a lot of people like to do this for like their intros for their bands and things like that. But go ahead and we'll give it a listen, and then we'll move on to the next effect. Easy stuff. We are on to the next effect, which is Old Town Radio. Ever wanted to sound like you were from the 1950s trying to pitch something like a used car to a new salesman? Well, this is the type of effect for you. So basically, what we're trying to do is, like I said, that 1950s kind of effect. It's not really an effect you would use in your song, but sometimes if you're doing like movies or stuff like that, you want to futz things. This is a really good gateway to understand how to do it, and it's called futzing in post-production. It basically just means that you're taking the audio and distorting it some way to make it fit as something else. So like if you're working on the Avengers and you're doing an Iron Man voice, that is called futzing. Or if you want to have your voice come through like a radio, that is futzing. You would take the original recording, which would be pristine like the one we're doing now, and then you would futz it so it fits. So let's go ahead and get into our Pro Tools session, and we are going to go ahead and talk about some good old futzing. So here I have a song where I did a nice little 1950s kind of feeling. So the first thing we're going to talk about is kind of how to give you that effect. So right now I have this right here. It is called Theater Piano, which already kind of gives you that effect, because if I were to take the effect off, the theater piano sounds like this. So there you go. So that's already kind of giving you the clue there. The second thing that a lot of people like to do is to go ahead and add what is known as static. So it's like that little grain you hear like in like old films and recordings. Very nice. The last thing we have here is, of course, the voice. So this is going to be the voice with the effect on it. It's going to sound like this.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special presentation.
Easy, right? So let's go ahead and get into the elements that make this what it is. A big thing about these types of effects is knowing the equipment from the time, of course, which would be like a gramophone, transponders, things like that. The biggest thing you need to know is that there is a certain frequency range at which these types of, I guess, instruments operated at. So normally they would have a cutoff at 500 hertz and another cutoff at about 5K. Now that's not give or take, that's not the hard case rule, you can always play around with that, but that's a good starting point. So if we go ahead and we go into this piano, we can go ahead and look at the EQ I have here, which is right here, as I can show you. So you have a high pass frequency cutoff of about 422, and if you don't know, that means basically anything under 422 hertz is being cut off by my EQ filter. And I also have a low pass filter, which is set to 2.3 kilohertz, which is a little extreme, honestly, but I really wanted to drive the effect home. And that means anything above 2.3 kilohertz is also being cut off. Now, another big thing about this stuff was there was a really big volume push in the 500 range. So it was a very mid-rangey, very nasally kind of sound like this, you know? So that was kind of what gave everyone that kind of impression that that's how people talked back then. It wasn't. They talked like us, but the way we recorded back then gave that huge nasal tone. The other thing about this is you also want it to kind of feel like it's compressed a bit. So what I did for my voice is the first thing I did was I put on this EQ. This EQ basically just allowed my voice to sound nice as a mix. And then from there, I added the effect. So I didn't just add the effect and leave it alone like, oh, cool. I kind of mixed my voice so it felt more pleasant to my ear at least, and then added the effect. So as you can see here, I have my compressor going, basically doing a nice little about 6 comp, no gain, no adding back the gain, just kind of pressing it down to give it that effect. And then over here, you can see that boost I was telling you about. So for this one, I actually moved it up because I didn't want my voice taking up the same frequency range as the piano. So you have a 700 to a 3.2K band pass is what it's called. When you have a low and a high pass together, it's called a band pass. And then I also have a boost in the 1.4K region because I felt that gave it more of that vintage tone while the piano was going on.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special...
And then you just go ahead and you add in the film static, and that's pretty much all I did here.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special presentation.
So let's go ahead and we'll listen to it with the effects off, and then we'll listen to them with it on. So this is no effects applied.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special presentation.
So as you can see, there's a lot of problems there. Aside from the volume, but let's see here. We'll lower the volume.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special presentation brought to you by Embro.
So as you can see, it's a little too pristine for the time. So we'll go ahead and we'll add all the stuff back on so we can hear the effect in motion.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special presentation.
And there you go. That's how you do the old theater effect. It's a really simple effect. I know a lot of people don't use it commonly, but it is just an effect, and it's something to think about, especially for futzing if you ever want to get your foot into the door with that kind of stuff. Now let's move on to effect number 3. So if you're still with us, first of all, thanks for joining. And second of all, thank you guys for the support on the last video, by the way. I think it was the studio tour. That actually is the most viewed video we have right now. So that's pretty cool. Let's move on to the next effect though. This effect is an effect that used to be really, really common, and it kind of fell out. And I can understand why, but at the same time, it's just something that was really common. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna look at that kind of outside listening perspective, I guess is the best way I can explain it. It's like the best example I could think of is probably like the Evanescence song. Like at the very end, I think it's Bring Me to Life at the very end, where the drums kind of sound like they're like being played through a wall and you're on the other side listening. So we're gonna do that kind of effect. Alright, so welcome back. So this is a really botched job of what I'm trying to admit here, but essentially it's another kind of futzing effect. Almost to the point of the old-time radio, but not as much. So the big thing about this one is you want it to sound like it's through a wall. And a big thing about walls is they're going to cut off a lot of high end and they're going to muffle a lot of low end. So it's hard to do that muffled low end kind of trick. So as you can see here, I kind of did it, not to the effect that I would want to, but I'm just doing a really quick demonstration. Sorry. So as you can see here, if I got it kind of lowered in like around the 180, 200 range around there. And that's just because like the kick drum in the bottom of my snare was cutting through real heavy. But so this is essentially the effect, and I'm going to turn off the reverb here so you can get a feeling of it. So it's essentially kind of like this. Because if I were to turn this effect off, yeah, huge volume difference. That was actually very loud. And then what I do to give it a little bit of airy emphasis for the song is I added a little bit of the reverb in. So it's kind of like you're listening, I don't know, the way I think of it is like, you know those peepholes they have on doors? I think of that, but in a sound context. So if I were to go ahead and put everything together on this section, it would sound like this. So it's kind of, this is a really bad example, and I'm actually kind of sorry about this one. That's essentially the kind of effect you want to go for. It's a huge cutoff, like huge, like I'm talking about below 1K cutoff. It's pretty harsh, pretty drastic, but it still gives enough room for stuff to come through, like cymbals and things like that. Essentially the type of effect that you're going for there. I know it wasn't the best example, but I should be able to make it up with this very last one. So let's go ahead and try to jump into that. So here we are at the fourth and final effect I want to share with you guys. In this one, I call it demon manipulation. Basically, this is just how to create separate voicings. So I don't really have an example of the one I'm thinking of. I do have an example of it with a guitar, however. So like this intro here that I have for a song actually kind of touches on that subject. So essentially, the way you do this, you can do it with two different effects. You can either do it with what is known as a doubler, which could be used as like a chorusy kind of effect, or you can do it with a pitch shifter. Either one works. So let's break it down. So the first thing we have is the original intro. This is what I recorded, which sounds like this. Which is a cool riff, right? Cool, nothing bad about it. But now let's go into what makes it sound evil, and I'm sure it's the first thing you see here is
Evil intro.
So let's go ahead and just hear what this sounds like. Oh, you're a funny guy. Let's go ahead and hop in and see why the evil intro is considered so evil. So here's what it sounds like. So essentially, all you're kind of doing is you're creating a weird type of fake dissonance between the original track and the double track with pitch shifting. What I use here, it's called Doubler 4 by Waves, but I'll also show you how to do it with like a pitch shifter, which pretty much any DAW will come with. So here on the Doubler 4, essentially I have them all aligned, right? The panning is still active if I need it, which I don't use. And then really, as you can see here in the gain staging, I have a big emphasis here on the around like 100, 111, and another one at 3K. That's just because those are just kind of crucial points. 100, 120 is about where the low mud is on guitars, and then the 3 to 4K is normally where you can get a lot of that hissy, ugly noise. And really all we did was we detuned. So we detuned one 6 up from the original note and then an octave down, and then we detuned another one an octave down with 6 tones down. So essentially they're both an octave down, but one is 6 tones up, one is 6 tones down, and that really gave us this low effect here. So what we're going to do is we're going to bypass this, and we're going to just create the effect from scratch with a pitch shifter. Easy enough. So let's go in, pitch shift, and we'll use pitch 2, because pitch 2 I know comes with Pro Tools. You may have a different one, but pitch shifters are all the same pretty much. So as you can see here, we have two sides. We have a left as well as a right, and we have different parameters for both. Right now they're linked. What we're going to want to do is go ahead and unlink them. And you can keep these two linked if you want. It just kind of makes their effects the same. But we really want the two pitches to be different. So with our left, let's go ahead and move this an octave down. And we'll move this one also an octave down. The way you can tell is because you're starting here on C, just move it an octave down on C. So now what we have is this. Right? Which is pretty low, but when you mix it with the other one, it's going to drown out. So we need a little bit of that definition that we had with the double of 4, and that's why we need the two different pitches. I actually went ahead and moved it back down to the octave again because I kind of like it. So now we have the original one, sounds like this. Great. And then now we have the evil intro again, which is just a pitch shift down and then changing the sense on it to fine tune it, which is like this. Which essentially kind of gives us the same effect we were going for at the beginning with the doubler, but now we did it with a pitch shifter. And then basically by adding that delay, a little bit of delay on it, you can tell the notes aren't lining up, which gives it a little more of that chaos factor, which I really like in stuff like this. Alright, ladies and gents, so here we are in the other example I wanted to show you guys, basically with that demon voice I was talking about. So if we go ahead and we just go ahead and listen to the voice on its own, it sounds like this.
If you find your sister before dawn, you are both free.
Easy stuff, nothing too crazy there. The big thing that you want to do with these kind of stuff, so basically I have a pitch 2 that's doing the low stuff, right? So with the demon kind of crazy stuff, especially the stuff you see in movies, you normally want a second pitch shifter on as well. And what this is going to do is it's going to have kind of like a weird high-pitched tone, but it's detuned a lot. So they kind of feel like they're fighting, and it's going to sound a lot like this.
If you find your sister before dawn, you are both free. If you don't,
You will lose everything, including your memory of your dear sis.
So essentially that's kind of, that sounds ridiculous, but that's essentially the kind of effect that you're going for here. So you have one pitch shifter. You can also do this with the dual pitch shifter on the left rights as well. So you have one that's kind of low. Here I have it pitched, it looks like to a fourth, I want to say. No, it's pitched to a third. It's a third down. And then on our other pitch shifter that we have here, we have it pitched up by an octave, but we have the volume very low, so it gives you the hint of that evil demonic presence there, but it's not really there. And as you can see, I fine-tuned it 17 cents up, which essentially is another like semitone up completely. So together,
If you don't, you will lose everything, including your memory of your dear sister.
alright, well, Pro Tools decided to quit on me again. I don't know what's going on with Pro Tools, but today Pro Tools is just not having a good time. So anyways, I'll play back the audio so you can hear it, because we do have it. But eventually, that's essentially how you do the technique. You have a low voice that is more prominent, and then a high voice that's probably about an octave or so up, and you want to have it brought down in volume so that you get that effect of that evil kind of presence. It's, once again, all these effects are really easy to do. It's just, I know a lot of people, like, as soon as they want to do an effect, they're like, oh, let's go to YouTube and try to find it. But there you go. That's some cool tricks you can do with audio editing. I've been Hounder64. My camera is about to die. You guys know the typical deal. I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.